The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the guests appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of 8 News Now or Nexstar Media Group.
Tonight on Politics Now, inflation, crime, and education. Republican candidates for governor lay out their plans. Plus,
number one, we're ethnically diverse.
Senator Jackie Rosen gives us Nevada's pitch to become the first state to nominate a president and the next step in the process. And does working for the DA's office and being in the legislature violate separation of powers? We look at the big decision in front of the state Supreme Court.
From 8 News Now, this is Politics Now.
Thank you for joining us here on Politics Now. I'm John Langler. The Republican race for governor is tightening up as we close in on the June primary. This week, 9 candidates were at a town hall forum. Joe Mola was there.
At a gubernatorial town hall Tuesday, 9 Republicans answered the same handful of questions. First, Attorney Joey Gilbert addressed the economy.
What do we need to diversify in, away from the service industry sector, away from mining?
Logistics manager Tom Heck wants to look at taxes.
Governors create an environment where jobs can flourish. How is that done? By cutting taxes?
Guy Nora says he wants to attract businesses.
I'm coming in with my business development people, or I close the deal as the governor. We need to show them that it's important for them to move here.
On crime, Sheriff Joe Lombardo says he is paying attention to the problems.
The national policies and the state policies associated with crime, the attitude towards crime, the softening of sentences, the softening of actual criminals' rights versus victims' rights.
On education, former Senator Dean Heller says the district needs to be fixed.
Is that this school district's too large. This school district needs to be broken down. And you take a complex problem and you make it much less of a problem.
On the topic of homelessness, Dr. Fred Simon says from the homeless veterans to mental health, it is a complex issue.
Bipolar and schizophrenic patients need proper medication. We need the legal people in our state to recognize you cannot stabilize a patient in 48 to 72 hours.
Real estate investor Barack Zilberberg wants a wellness community.
Elon Musk, which he has $15,000 cubicles. I'm going to subdivide parcels. So we drop those cubicles in for $15,000 and have a wellness community.
Eddie Hamilton says we need more land for affordable housing.
So we need affordable housing. To get that, we got to have a lot of public land.
On water concerns, North Las Vegas Mayor John Lee says the water Nevada gets but doesn't use needs to be saved.
Instead of that water going down, we need to make sure the reservoirs up at the top start filling up their reservoirs again.
Joe Moeller, Live, Local Now.
Now, after the forum, former President Donald Trump endorsed Clark County Sheriff Joe Lombardo in the governor's race. The former president said, quote, Joe will fiercely protect our under siege Second Amendment, oppose sanctuary cities, support our law enforcement. He says Lombardo, according to former President Trump, is the leader Nevada needs. Current Governor Steve Sisolak's campaign responded with this, quote, it's clear Joe Lombardo's campaign is hitting the panic button after getting attacks from all sides on the airwaves, called out for hiding, ripped for having it both ways on immigration. Lombardo is also out with the first ad paid for by his campaign. A PAC supporting him has been running those ads you've already seen on television.
Politicians, they hide behind commercials and social media, trying to act tough. A bunch of keyboard cowboys. They talk tough about immigration.
The ad focuses on violent crime and deportations. Meanwhile, Democrats are preparing for Nevada to become the first state in the 2024 presidential nominating process. The person pitching Nevada's case is Senator Jackie Rosen. She spoke with 8 News Now I-Team reporter David Charnes.
Number one, we're ethnically diverse. We look like the rest of the nation. We have a large Hispanic community, large African American community, one of the fastest growing AAPI communities in the country. We are union strong. We have good voter access in our state. 2 media markets makes it easier. And I would say, most importantly, we are a battleground state. And so the path to the presidency runs right through Nevada. So any potential candidate should be listening to what Nevadans have to say, what's important to us. We're going to reflect what's the rest of the nation thinks. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons, some of the biggest reasons Nevada should be first in the nation.
Is your goal to have Nevada be first on its own day like we've seen in Iowa or New Hampshire, or are you cool with Nevada, South Carolina, Iowa, New Hampshire being their own sort of first day altogether? Where do you stand on that?
Well, I'm going to leave that up to the DNC to decide. You know, we submit a letter of intent hoping to be first in the nation. We're going to argue our case, but of course it's ultimately up to them. But I do think that it is really important that the first in the nation, or whatever the DNC decides, that it should look like the rest of America.
Tell me about some of the work that goes into this. There was an article a couple of weeks ago that mentioned you working long hours in the Capitol, working on some paperwork to sort of get this done. What goes into your work to try to do this on behalf of Democrats in Nevada?
We'll be submitting the letter of intent, then the DNC will schedule time for advocates in the state to come argue our case. And then the Rules and Bylaws Committee for the DNC will make whatever decision they feel is right for the entire nation.
Do you think that the previous primaries, and I'm not saying pick a specific presidential year, but do you think that previous years could have been different? Say Nevada was first because we are diverse, and maybe a different candidate would have come out of Nevada than, let's say, a first place candidate in Iowa or New Hampshire?
Well, it's hard to go back. I'm going to leave that to the historians to analyze what might have happened if Nevada was first. You know, we've been first in the West for the last few cycles, I think 4 cycles it is. And so I think that we've shown that we can deliver, that we know how to bring candidates in to run those grassroots efforts, be sure that all of Nevadans are listening to the different candidates. And of course, now that it's a primary, they'll be able to vote just like they do in a regular election.
Why is Senator Rosen the spearhead of this?
I've had the time to do it. I'm not on the ballot this time, so I've had a little bit of time that I can devote to this. But let me tell you, it is a unified effort. It is a team effort. The governor, Senator Cortez Masto, our other federal electeds, we're all talking together. Of course, with so many advocates up and down the state, it's been a unified team effort. I've just been able to be a little bit more involved because I'm not on the ballot this cycle.
Of course, Senator Rosen's colleague, Senator Catherine Cortez Masto, is up for re-election. One of her opponents, Senate Republican candidate Adam Laxalt, campaigned this week with his old Navy roommate, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Wednesday's Rise Up rally had a crowd of more than 1,000 people over at Stoney's Rockin' Country. The pair attacked woke culture and the radical left, they say. They cited the collapse of CNN Plus, that streaming service, and they also referenced Tesla CEO Elon Musk buying Twitter. Both of those as proof. Republicans, they say, are on the march. Vice President Kamala Harris tested positive for COVID-19 this week. She is asymptomatic, her office says. The White House says she hasn't had any contact with President Joe Biden since April 18th. Vice President Harris is currently working from home. Last weekend saw another murder at the Apex Apartments. It's the 4th one at that property in the last year. The unlicensed apartment complex is near Twain in Cambridge. And the 8 News Now I-team has been investigating it since August. And we've now learned owners of the property benefited from coronavirus relief money. The I-team's Vanessa Murphy tracked down the numbers and the county commissioner who represents the area.
The Apex Apartments here are crime-ridden. Police are constantly here. There are deplorable conditions. The county is trying to take action. In the meantime, the I-team has learned the owners have been collecting public tax dollars.
So where'd our money go? They don't fix anything. They don't help us.
Clark County spent more than $326,000 in the past year to help tenants here pay back rent, according to a Clark County spokesman. That's while conditions at the unlicensed property have drastically deteriorated. California-based company Pro Residential bought the place in January of last year. The county is now suing the owners, alleging they conspired to illegally provide unsafe housing in multiple states to collect coronavirus relief money and schemed with criminal enterprises. For example, allowing drug dealers to advertise on signs.
The fact that this landlord would get county money to support This is pretty crazy.
Commissioner Tick Sagerblum, who represents this neighborhood, says he was here 2 weeks ago asking the owner to make repairs and to hire security. Then on Sunday, someone opened fire in the courtyard.
They promised to have security. How could that happen if you have 2 security officers here full time?
County records reveal Sunday marks the 4th homicide in about a year here, along with nearly 700 calls for service, a stabbing, 19 shootings, a SWAT search for a drug house, and 50 burglaries or robberies. The county alleges property managers aren't willing to walk the halls here because they know it's unsafe. Officers were on standby during our visit with the commissioner. Squatters are also an issue here. We saw one woman leave what was a boarded-up unit.
And then think about the neighbors around. I mean, they're having to live with this environment. There's a lot of kids that live here. There's an elementary school just down the road.
Commissioner Sagerblum says the county is trying to avoid shutting the place down, but may have to, and county reps would help residents find a new home. He also says he wants to create a law making the landlord's actions a criminal felony.
They should be going to jail.
The I-Team's requests for an interview with the owners have been ignored. Vanessa Murphy, live, local, now.
In a statement, Clark County said while withholding CHAP funds from certain landlords may have helped with other concerns, it would have also resulted in evictions and homelessness for some tenants, which they added was their primary concern. Next on Politics Now, separation of powers, the case which could force some members of the legislature to find another day job. Plus, a dramatic prisoner swap with Russia, the people who still need to be rescued.
About Ibrance.
Welcome back to Politics Now.
Clark County School District leaders are hoping to take a step forward in addressing concerns from the community, safety concerns. The district hosted a conversation on school safety during a Facebook Live event this week. Comes after several violent incidents across the district at several different campuses. One issue CCSD is working to fix: the lack of counselors and social workers.
We're not where we want to be as far as a comparison perspective with other districts across the country, but we have partnered with outside vendors to help us attract and retain social workers.
School leaders say they have already made improvements at El Dorado High School. You'll remember that's where a teacher was attacked a few weeks ago. The district is also looking to local police to help with enforcement across the district. A big setback for 2 Republican initiative petitions that are now in court. They could keep them from getting on the ballot. One is on voter ID. The other rolls back the automatic mail-in ballots. Judges in Carson City ruled language on the initiative was misleading. That means supporters have to start over on getting 145,000 signatures to get them on the ballot. They have 7 weeks to collect those signatures. A lawyer for those initiatives is Republican Attorney General candidate Sigal Chattah. Nevada's Constitution has a separation of powers clause. That means people can't work for 2 branches of government at the same time. So what counts as working for the governor's office for some people in the legislature? The Nevada Supreme Court says it finally needs to be ruled on by a court. And we spoke with an attorney on the case, Colleen McCarty.
What would the Supreme Court, the state Supreme Court, be deciding?
So there's really 2 issues. The overarching issue is whether or not it's a violation of the Nevada Constitution under the separation of powers clause for elected legislators to also serve as government employees. That's the big question. What the Supreme Court decided most recently is whether or not NPRI, the Nevada Policy Research Institute, has what's known as standing to bring the case. Standing is a procedural mechanism. Or in order for anybody to bring a lawsuit, you have to be able to allege, unless there are some exceptions, that you have personal harm. And with respect to NPRI,
what are some of the red flags that stick out to you about positions, not necessarily people, but positions that might come up where someone is, say, you know, working for a judge, but then is also making law? Like, what are some examples?
So one of the defendants in our case, Nicole Canizero, until recently was a prosecutor in the Clark County District Attorney's Office and also a state lawmaker. And so in that position, essentially, she has the ability to not only make the laws, but then turn around and enforce the laws. And certainly we argued in our brief that during the last legislative session, there were a number of items on the agenda related to criminal justice reform, including the death penalty. So the question then becomes, if I'm working as a government employee, whether I'm a prosecutor, whether I'm a teacher, whether I'm any sort of government employee, does that impact how I behave, how I vote, what issues are important to me in the legislature? So this issue has been percolating for decades. There are a number of attorney general's opinions about it. There are a number of legislative council bureau opinions on it. NPRI has brought suit twice and not made it up to the Nevada Supreme Court for procedural issues. Again, this third time around in the lower court, NPRI was denied based on a procedural issue, that standing issue we talked about. But the Nevada Supreme Court said no. This time, we are going to allow this case to proceed because we think it's a matter of public importance.
There's a lot of crossover with people who are in one branch and in another branch. So if you were to succeed and whoever makes their final ruling says, yeah, you can't do both, do you think that would really upend a lot of people in the legislature?
So there are a number of people who are no longer in the case because of resignations, or they decided not to run again. I know we have another one that we didn't include initially who now fits into the category. So we've got about 9 or 10 defendants at this point, I think, and they are both Democrats and Republicans. But I think the bigger question really is, do we want to continue this practice as a state of allowing people who serve as lawmakers to also essentially work in positions where they're enforcing those laws, furthering those laws? And do we want to continue to have a legislature that may be conflicted because their employers come to the legislature asking for things?
McCarty is a former 8 News Now I-Team reporter. Now the case is going to head back to the lower court and will decide the bigger question. No matter what happens, though, it is likely it will get appealed to the state Supreme Court. A federal judge says he will decide in the next few weeks if the execution of Zane Floyd is going forward. Floyd was convicted of killing 3 people and sentenced to death in 2004. The judge in the case says key questions about the execution method are still unanswered. A supply of sedatives expired at the end of February, and state detention officials, they say they cannot get more. There's also no active death warrant on the case right now. The judge says he'll make a decision by May 16th. Dealing with the border. Next on Politics Now, the role a public health emergency is playing in our current policy there, and the debate over whether it should stay or go.
Now, you're watching Politics Now.
Relations between the U.S. and Russia are at their lowest point in years, and at the heart, as you can imagine, is the war in Ukraine. Still, a dramatic prisoner swap between both the U.S. and Russia was pulled off this week. The U.S. was given back Marine veteran Trevor Reed. He spent nearly 1,000 days in Russian custody after being convicted for assaulting someone while drunk, an allegation he denies. In exchange, the U.S. released a Russian who'd served 20 years for drug smuggling. Reed's family says the exchange was worth it.
President Biden saved our son's life today.
A perfect Mother's Day, almost as good as the day he was born.
The U.S. is still working to free other Americans in custody in Russia, including women's basketball player Brittany Griner. The debate over immigration policy heating up in Washington, D.C. A federal judge recently blocked the Biden administration from ending a President Trump-era policy called Title 42. Rashad Hudson has that story.
Late Monday, a federal judge threw a wrench in the government's plan to lift Title 42 through a temporary restraining order. Missouri Attorney General Eric Schmidt says it was the right decision.
It's a big win, I think, for border security and the rule of law.
The Trump-era policy allows migrants seeking asylum to be expelled through a pandemic health policy. Louisiana Senator John Kennedy and Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell say there's no reason to make a change.
One of the most foolish ideas coming from an administration that has become famous for foolish ideas.
Pulling back the Title 42 authorities will only make it dramatically worse.
It's not just Republicans who are raising concerns about changes to the policy. Democrats are also warning the administration about rolling it back. West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin also wants it to remain in place.
And basically protect our people and citizens of the United States and making sure that people coming are coming for the right reason.
But Ohio Senator Sherrod Brown says Title 42 is no longer needed because the country is at a different place in the pandemic.
We have had pretty incredible success in fighting this pandemic and getting shots in people's arms.
The future of the policy will likely be a major topic when Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas testifies to the House Judiciary Committee later this week. Reporting in Washington, Rashad Hudson.
All Democrats in Nevada's delegation are against lifting Title 42 until a more permanent plan's in place. They are in favor, though, of getting rid of it eventually. Politics Now is back after this.
$3333.
This week in What to Watch, potentially raising fees on businesses. The Southern Nevada Health District is considering raising an environmental health fee paid by most small businesses. The department says it needs to make up budget losses from inflation. The special meeting to discuss this will be held on Thursday. We will have coverage of that and more political news coming up this week here on 8 News Now. Thank you for watching Politics Now. We do appreciate it, of course. For all the latest political news, just head to 8newsnow.com. You'll be all caught up. We're back with you next Saturday. We thank you so much for joining us. Take care.